There are 10 behaviors that destroy your reputation, and you probably tolerate at least 3 of them. But it's not your fault. Nobody taught you where to draw the line. The problem isn't people, it's your tolerance. I'll show you the 10 unacceptable behaviors you must cut immediately, using strategies from 3 philosophers who mastered power dynamics. Machiavelli, Foucault, and Fromm spent decades mapping how manipulation operates in relationships. 10 behaviors, 10 precise responses, from friends to family. No one gets a pass. Have you ever noticed how some people can make you feel small without even raising their voice? How they plant doubts in your head about your own decisions? How they turn your successes into reasons for their discomfort? This doesn't happen by accident. There's a brutal difference between being a good person and being a weak person. Goodness establishes clear boundaries. Weakness accepts anything in the name of peace. And here's the truth that's going to hurt. Every destructive behavior you tolerate today will repeat tomorrow, only worse. Machiavelli discovered this by observing how principalities were destroyed from within, not by invading armies, but by people close by who tested limits until nothing remained of the original power. Foucault saw how micropowers operate in daily life, creating submission through small repeated gestures. Fromm mapped how authority is exercised through guilt and emotional blackmail until the victim becomes complicit in their own oppression. The result of tolerating these behaviors is always the same. You lose self-respect. People around you lose respect for you, and your life becomes a theater where you always play the role of willing victim. Excessive tolerance isn't virtue, it's complicity with your own diminishment. But you've been conditioned to believe that being a good person means swallowing disrespect with a smile on your face. Observe your own behavior. How many times have you heard an indirect comment and pretended not to understand? How many times has someone devalued your achievement and you changed the subject to avoid conflict? How many times did they laugh at your idea, and you laughed along to not seem sensitive? Every time you did that, you taught that person that your dignity is negotiable. Fromm identified this pattern studying how authoritarian regimes establish themselves. In Escape from Freedom, he showed that submission doesn't begin with explicit violence. It begins with small concessions that seem harmless. A joke here, a comment there, criticism disguised as care. Gradually, you internalize that it's easier to adapt than to confront. The mechanism is simple and devastating. You tolerate the first disrespect because you want to keep peace. The second because that's not exactly what the person meant. The third because maybe I'm overreacting. By the fourth, you don't even notice anymore. You've completely normalized it. Now that person knows exactly how far they can go with you, and they'll always go a little further next time because you've become predictable. And predictable people are easily controlled. There's a cruel logic behind each of these behaviors you tolerate. A specific psychology that works against your autonomy. Destructive behaviors repeat because you allow them, and the first one that needs to be eliminated operates through the most powerful emotion that exists: guilt. Imagine the following situation. You decide not to lend money to someone, a completely rational decision within your rights, but the response you get isn't an, "Okay, I understand." It's something like, "Wow, I thought I could count on you, but it's fine, I'll figure it out alone, I always do." Or worse, "It's okay. I know you don't really care about me anyway." Pay attention to what just happened. Your fair and reasonable decision was transformed into an act of cruelty. You became the villain for establishing a basic boundary, and now you feel a tightness in your chest, a desire to take it back, to explain yourself, to prove you're not a bad person. Erich Fromm lived this firsthand. When he decided to break with the orthodox psychoanalytic circle in Berlin in the 1930s, he wasn't attacked with technical arguments. He was emotionally isolated. Colleagues who once respected him began treating him coldly, questioning not his ideas, but his personal motivations. The focus shifted from "your theories are wrong" to "you're disappointing those who believed in you." Fromm identified this as a pattern of control through guilt, which he would later document in Escape from Freedom. Instead of using brute force, the manipulator uses your guilt against you. They transform your no into cruelty, your autonomy into selfishness, your independence into betrayal. The first unacceptable behavior is this: emotional blackmail. When someone transforms your decisions into their emotional wounds, when they make you feel guilty for having boundaries, when your freedom of choice becomes their suffering, the response isn't to explain or justify yourself. It's to recognize the manipulation and cut it at the root. People who don't respect your boundaries use an invisible weapon that destroys your confidence word by word, and you don't even realize you're being attacked. I'll show you how it works. You share an achievement with someone and hear, "That's nice, you really got lucky." Or you express an opinion and hear, "Interesting, I never thought you'd think that way." Or even, "Wow, you're different lately, more confident." All these phrases have something in common. At first glance, they seem neutral, even positive, but they carry a subtle poison. They question your capability, your authenticity, or your stability. They turn your success into chance, your opinion into surprise, your evolution into a problem. Michel Foucault discovered this mechanism brutally when he was a professor at the Collège de France. Academic colleagues didn't attack him directly. That would be too vulgar. Instead, they developed a sophisticated form of intellectual isolation through subtle questioning about the relevance of his work and apparently neutral comments that planted doubts about his contributions. Foucault realized this was micropower in action. In Discipline and Punish, he showed how institutions control individuals not through explicit violence, but through constant surveillance and subtle judgments that make the person question themselves. You internalize the doubt. You start thinking, "Am I overreacting? Do I really deserve this? Am I being arrogant?" The second unacceptable behavior is subtle invalidation. When someone questions your reality through seemingly innocent phrases, when they minimize your achievements with luck, when they treat your opinions as surprises, when they make your evolution seem like a problem, they don't want to destroy you at once. They want you to destroy yourself, doubting yourself until you can no longer trust your own judgment. The strategy is simple. Recognize invalidation the exact moment it happens and respond with a direct question that exposes the intention. There's a type of person who never cheers for your success but always appears when you fail with advice and support. And you probably mistake this for friendship. Observe the patterns. When you get that promotion, they disappear or make comments like, "Wow, what a responsibility, huh? I hope you can handle it." When you end a toxic relationship, they stay silent. But when you fail at something, when you make a public mistake, when you go through difficulty, then they appear with all the attention in the world. I warned you it wasn't a good idea. At least now you've learned. Don't worry, everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is that now you're free from those illusions. You think it's care. Actually, it's competition masked as compassion. Niccolò Machiavelli learned this the most brutal way possible. For years, he circulated among the powerful in Florence, observing how political alliances worked. When the Medici family returned to power in 1512, Machiavelli was imprisoned and tortured. Later, he reflected on how people who seemed like allies quickly became hostile when he lost his position of power. Machiavelli concluded that these people had never considered him a real ally. They tolerated his success while he was useful, but secretly waited for his downfall. In The Prince, he wrote a devastating observation. Men judge more by the eyes than by the hands, because all can see, but few can touch. What he was saying is that most people relate to your public image, not to who you really are. And when your public image surpasses theirs, a silent competition is born. They don't want to actively destroy you. That would be too obvious. They prefer to secretly root for your failure. The third unacceptable behavior is disguised competition, when someone rejoices more in your problems than in your successes, when they offer support in difficult moments, but disappear during your victories, when they make you believe your ambitions are dangerous and your successes are strokes of luck. The response is to stop sharing your victories with those who only appear in your defeats. The most efficient control doesn't use chains, it uses proximity. Care and surveillance so constant that you don't even realize you're being monitored. It starts innocently. Where are you going? With whom? What time will you be back? Questions that seem like genuine interest. Then it evolves to apparently casual comments. How strange you didn't tell me about this. I thought we were closer. You've been kind of distant, haven't you? Next come unsolicited opinions about your decisions. Are you sure that's a good idea? That person doesn't seem trustworthy to me. I think you're rushing. Always wrapped in a tone of concern, never imposition. The final stage is when you internalize this surveillance. Before making any important decision, you already hear that person's voice in your head. What will so-and-so think? How will I explain this? Better not risk it, it'll cause problems. Michel Foucault identified this mechanism studying psychiatric hospitals between 1955 and 1960. He observed how patients were controlled not through physical violence, but through constant observation. Nurses asked apparently innocent questions, noted behaviors, created reports on progress and cooperation. The result was devastating. Patients began to watch themselves. They modified behaviors even when no one was looking. because they internalized that they were always being observed. Foucault called this panopticism, the power to control through the constant possibility of surveillance. In Discipline and Punish, he showed how this works in intimate relationships. The controlling person doesn't need to be physically present to influence your decisions. They've already installed an internal surveillance system in your mind. The fourth unacceptable behavior is control through proximity. When someone constantly monitors your decisions, disguising it as interest or concern. When they transform care into surveillance. When they make you feel obligated to be accountable for choices that are exclusively yours. Liberation begins when you stop explaining your decisions to those who won't live them. Controlling people use a specific psychological weapon that attacks your need for autonomy, transforming your personal achievements into reasons for shame. The difference with this manipulation is that it doesn't attack your specific decisions. It attacks your evolving identity. They make you feel guilty, not for what you did, but for who you're becoming. Erich Fromm lived this when he decided to emigrate to Mexico in 1950. Colleagues didn't attack his decision directly. They morally questioned his choice, treating his intellectual evolution as betrayal to the community that had welcomed him. This experience showed Fromm how guilt-tripping works, specifically against personal growth. In The Fear of Freedom, he documents that manipulators use guilt to block evolution because their own identity depends on you remaining stagnant. The mechanism is perverse. They make you feel that any independent action of yours causes suffering in them, that your happiness is built on their sadness, that you owe your well-being to them, and any movement toward autonomy is betrayal. The fifth unacceptable behavior is manipulation through guilt, when someone transforms your healthy choices into cruelty, when they make you feel responsible for their emotional well-being, when they use what they did for you in the past as currency to control your future. The only response is to recognize that you're not responsible for anyone's happiness but your own. There's a brutal difference between someone who questions your ideas and someone who systematically attacks your right to have ideas. The second type doesn't want to win arguments. They want you to stop arguing completely. While subtle invalidation attacks your specific opinions, systematic devaluation attacks your general competence. The goal isn't to correct you, it's to make you give up trying. Niccolo Machiavelli experienced this brutally after his political fall. For years, he tried to regain the Medici's trust by sending letters, offering political advice, even writing The Prince as a kind of practical resume. The responses were always courteous, but systematically devaluing. Lorenzo de' Medici and others in the family received his detailed political analyses, but always treated them as historical curiosities from someone from the past, not as relevant contributions to the present. They never rejected directly. That would be admitting he still had value. They preferred making him feel obsolete, outdated, irrelevant. Machiavelli realized this was a deliberate strategy. In his letters to Francesco Vettori, he wrote about how the powerful use devaluation to keep potential rivals away without creating martyrs. It's more efficient to make someone believe they're worthless than to publicly banish them. He observed that systematic devaluation works because it attacks something fundamental, your perception of your own worth. It's not about what you did wrong. It's about who you fundamentally are not being enough. The sixth unacceptable behavior is systematic devaluation. When someone consistently minimizes your achievements, questions your importance, or makes comparisons that diminish you. When they transform your successes into accidents and your qualities into disguised flaws. The defense is to stop seeking validation from those who have an interest in keeping you small. Privacy isn't secrecy. Privacy is dignity, and some people treat your need for personal space as if it were a crime against transparency. The invasion always begins with the same phrase, "We don't have secrets from each other, right?" As if intimacy were synonymous with total surveillance. As if loving someone meant having unlimited right to that person's mental space. What these people don't understand, or pretend not to understand, is that autonomy isn't a threat to the relationship. It's a condition for it to be healthy. Boundary invasion never begins aggressively. It begins with small violations disguised as legitimate interest. Someone reads your messages over your shoulder accidentally, goes through your belongings because they were looking for something else, asks detailed questions about your financial life because they want to help you organize better, opinions on your personal choices because they care about you. Each invasion is individually justified, and you accept because, in isolation, each one seems too small to be worth a conflict. But the cumulative result is devastating. you completely lose the right to privacy, autonomy, your own mental space. Michel Foucault observed this empirically when he taught at the University of Tunis between 1966 and 1968. He noticed how students were constantly monitored, not just in classrooms, but in dormitories, cafeterias, even personal correspondence. The justification was always pedagogical care or institutional responsibility. The result wasn't just loss of privacy, it was something much worse. Students stopped developing their own inner lives. Knowing that everything would eventually be observed and judged, they began to self-censor preventively. Foucault called this disciplinarization of personal space, when external surveillance becomes internal self-surveillance. In The History of Sexuality, he showed how this operates in intimate relationships. The invasive person doesn't need to be physically present to control your mental space. You've already internalized the expectation that everything must be shared, explained, justified. The seventh unacceptable behavior is boundary invasion, when someone treats your privacy as public property, when they transform curiosity into right of access, when they make you feel selfish for wanting your own space. The response is simple and painful. Stop justifying why you need privacy. The most cowardly war is one where you fight against an army that doesn't even know it's being used as a weapon. And some people have turned this into a control strategy. Effective triangulation works like this. Instead of taking sole responsibility for the conflict, they spread a version of the situation that favors them to people who trust them. The mechanics are simple and devastating. Instead of taking sole responsibility for the conflict, they spread a version of the situation that favors them to people who trust them. These people, without knowing your side of the story, begin pressuring you out of concern. You find yourself fighting not against one person, but against an entire group that seems genuinely worried about you. The psychological result is brutal. You begin to question whether you're really wrong, whether you're being stubborn, whether you're hurting innocent people who just want your good. The pressure no longer comes from one interested person. It comes from several who seem disinterested. Erich Fromm identified this pattern studying group dynamics at the Frankfurt School's Institute for Social Research during the 1930s. He observed how authoritarian leaders never confronted dissidents directly. Instead, they mobilized the group against the divergent individual, making it seem like resistance came from the concerned community, not from threatened authority. In his research on German families, Fromm documented how authoritarian parents used other children, relatives, and even neighbors to pressure the child who questioned family rules. The message was never "you're challenging me," but "you're worrying the whole family." Fromm observed that this created devastating psychological isolation. The person felt attacked by everyone, when actually they were being manipulated by one. In The Heart of Man, he analyzed how groups can be mobilized against individuals through distortion of information and appeals to collective concern. The eighth unacceptable behavior is effective triangulation. When someone recruits third parties to pressure you, instead of dealing directly with the conflict. When they transform your personal decision into collective concern. When they use other people as ventriloquists for their own manipulation. The defense is recognizing that a genuinely concerned group would talk to you directly, not be mobilized by someone with particular interest. The most dangerous enemy isn't the one who attacks you head-on. It's the one who smiles at you while discreetly cutting the wires that support your opportunities. Think about the times you were about to achieve something important and, mysteriously, the wrong person knew the wrong information at the wrong time, or when someone forgot to tell you about a crucial meeting, or when comments reached you that someone had supposedly made about your competence precisely when you most needed confidence. You probably attributed it to coincidence, bad luck, or misunderstanding, but there's a pattern in these interferences that people close to you may be orchestrating absolutely consciously. Niccolò Machiavelli discovered this through a devastating personal experience. Between 1513 and 1520, he desperately tried to regain a political position, sending detailed proposals to the Medici, offering strategic consultations, even dedicating the prince to Lorenzo de' Medici. But Machiavelli began to notice that his ideas appeared in political contexts before he even had a chance to present them formally. People from his own circle gained access to opportunities similar to those he sought, often using approaches he had discussed privately. The cruelest part was that these people never denied direct support. On the contrary, they always showed solidarity with his frustrations, offering advice on how to improve the approach and next opportunities. It took Machiavelli years to understand that he wasn't competing with the political market, but being systematically neutralized by people he trusted. This experience led Machiavelli to develop his understanding of how people close to you can be more dangerous than declared enemies, a theme that appears repeatedly in his later works. The ninth unacceptable behavior is subtle sabotage, when someone deliberately interferes with your opportunities while maintaining appearance of neutrality or support. When they use information you shared to get ahead of you, when they create obstacles disguised as coincidence. The protection is simple but painful. Stop sharing your plans with those who have an interest in occupying the same space as you. The cruelest punishment someone can apply to you isn't physical violence or direct insult. It's making you disappear socially until you go back to behaving the way they want. It works like this. You establish a clear boundary, make an independent decision, or simply evolve beyond what they expected from you. The response isn't discussion or confrontation, it's total silence. You stop being invited, informed, included. Conversations stop when you arrive. Your presence becomes inconvenient until you learn to return to your previous place. Erich Fromm experienced this brutally when he published The Art of Loving in 1956. The book challenged psychoanalytic orthodoxies about relationships, proposing that true love requires individuality, not fusion. The psychoanalytic community's response wasn't academic refutations. It was systematic professional ostracism. Fromm stopped being cited in important journals, was no longer invited to relevant conferences. His former students stopped seeking supervision from him. The isolation was so effective that Fromm himself observed how he was being systematically excluded from academic debate for having challenged established consensuses. In The Art of Loving, he identified that isolation as punishment works because it attacks our fundamental need for belonging. The person doesn't need to convince you that you're wrong. They just need to make you feel alone until you prefer conformity to solitude. The 10th unacceptable behavior is social isolation as punishment, when someone systematically excludes you for having established boundaries. When they use your need for belonging as a weapon to force submission. Now you know the 10 behaviors that destroy your dignity. The response to all of them is the same. Immediate recognition followed by proportional action. Emotional blackmail. Cut the conversation. Subtle invalidation. Question the intention. Disguise competition. Stop sharing victories. Control through proximity. Stop explaining yourself. Manipulation through guilt. Reaffirm your autonomy. Systematic devaluation. Gradually cut contact. Boundary invasion. Establish clear consequences. Effective triangulation. Confront directly. Subtle sabotage. Protect strategic information. Social isolation. Accept temporary solitude as the price of dignity. You don't need to be cruel, just firm. You don't need to explain, just act. Your life will change when you stop negotiating the non-negotiable. Your right to exist with dignity. Now you've seen how to identify behaviors that destroy your posture. Click the video on screen to discover the power techniques Machiavelli used to never be disrespected again. Click the video on screen now